Being a chartered manager means that you are a specialist in that area, and it means you've got all the skills to do the job to the best of its ability.
You are seen as a leader, a true leader who has credentials behind the great work you've already been doing.
It's enhanced my understanding, it's enhanced my skill set, it's improved my mindset.
It makes all the difference.
This session is recorded and will be available on the CMI website and YouTube channel. Join the conversation by using the live chat box for your questions and comments. We'll answer as many as we can during the Q&A.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Generations at Work Shared Values, New Perspectives digital event. My name is Mary Bolawale, and I am an event delivery coordinator at CMI. Don't forget to join the conversation by using the live chat box, and feel free to ask any questions you have for the speakers, and we'll answer as many as possible during the Q&A session. I'll now hand over to Matt Platt, the event lead of the CMI South East Regional Board, to begin today's event.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Mary. Lovely to be here, and thank you all very much for attending. We're really looking forward to this conversation. So as Mary mentioned, by night I'm the Southeast Regional Board events lead. By day I'm a project leader with some 19 years of experience of leading teams on technology-enabled projects across a range of industries. So getting into the topic at hand, this is particularly fascinating to me, and to I suspect many others, with at the core of it being how to form productive teams and working relationships with others across very diverse sets of backgrounds, which in some cases can have different decades worth of difference in terms of their length of working careers and life experience. So how can we use that diversity and potential challenges and turn those into opportunities to improve our organizations, our teams, and hopefully bring benefit to each of us personally? I'm going to introduce the speakers now. So first off, we have Rebekah, who is a co-colleague on the South East Board with myself. Rebekah, hi.
Hi, Matt. Thank you. Yeah, Rebekah Patterson. I'm a Policy and Insights Officer at Bracknell Forest Council, and as Matt mentioned, also Board Secretary for the CMI South East Regional Board. Great to be here today.
Thank you very much, Rebekah. And then on to Tim.
Hi there, lovely to be here with you all today. I'm Tim Brown. I'm the creative lead and co-founder at Oxygen. We're a small design and communications agency working purely with purpose-led organisations.
Thank you very much, Tim. And last but not least, Stuart.
Hi everyone. My name's Stuart Campbell. I look after fundraising and marketing for a charity called Make Some Noise. And we're the in-house charity of Global, the media entertainment company. So you might listen to some of Global's radio stations, Heart and Capital and Radio X, and pick your favourite. So I do fundraising and marketing across those brands.
Well, it's fantastic of you all to be with us here today. We're really looking forward to this being a very interesting conversation. So we're going to start with a brief presentation by each of you, and then we'll go into a discussion on some of the key threads within this topic, and then we'll end up with a Q&A. So if you're in the audience listening and you have a burning question, please do add it into the thread, and we'll look forward to covering some of those later. All right, so first up is Rebekah, please.
Thanks, Matt. So hello everyone, Rebekah Patterson. I'm really pleased to be here today joining in the conversation, something I'm really passionate about as someone early in their career and also part of Gen Z, so looking forward to hearing all of the insights from today. I began my career journey, next slide, thank you. So I began my career journey during a time of kind of significant disruption. I studied for a degree in politics and sociology from the University of Sheffield during the pandemic, which had its interesting features. Had very limited face-to-face collaboration, and the majority of my degree was online. It was quite isolating at times, but I do think it taught me a lot about resilience, adaptability, and also just how to navigate in the digital space with confidence. Then after graduating, I got a place on Impact, the local government graduate programme, which was formerly known as the National Graduate Development Programme, run by the Local Government Association. And through that, it was 2 years where I was placed at Bracknell Forest Council, rotating around different placements within the council and their services, and I obtained my CMI Level 7 Strategic Leadership and Management qualification through that, and then also picked up some CMI bite-sized courses as part of my role on the South East Regional Board, which has now led me to gaining Foundation Chartered Management status. And then back in the summer of this year, I came off the graduate programme and I have started in a permanent position at the council as Policy and Insights Officer. So still quite new to that, but yeah, really enjoying it. And I think one of the things really is that I work in a sector that typically isn't associated with younger professionals. And so I think that's what makes this conversation quite important to me, just from my experience. And next slide, thanks. So I think what's quite interesting is that despite sort of being part of Gen Z, and there's a kind of a stereotype there with this generation that we kind of have a preference for remote work, I actually really crave that in-person collaboration. You know, I missed out on a lot of the sort of informal learning and spontaneous interactions that came with being physically present in a lecture hall or a seminar room. So now in my career, I sort of actively seek those opportunities. Yeah, next slide, please. But I think the workplace has sort of moved on now, post-pandemic especially, and hybrid and remote models are sort of now the norm. And they do offer flexibility, which I think is great, but actually they also present some challenges, especially for those that are early in their career. You know, trying to build networks and relationships and learning by osmosis and feeling part of a team, it can be quite difficult to do that in spaces that are often quite virtual. Next slide, please. But I think this is where we kind of need to be careful not to generalise, and Gen Z really isn't one size fits all. I think our experiences during the pandemic particularly were varied, so our responses to our work are probably varied too. So I think some of us do value that flexibility above everything else, but also others do crave that sort of connection and structure a bit more, like myself. And I think with that, you know, organisations need to listen and they need to adapt and they need to avoid those assumptions, especially for sort of those early in their career and the younger generation. Next slide, please. I think I found the kind of key to bridging generational gaps is just about curiosity. We need to take time to understand each other's experiences, you know, whether it's a sort of seasoned colleague who values office presence a bit more or a younger team member who thrives in remote settings or vice versa. But we need to sort of build stronger and more inclusive teams and kind of create those spaces for different working styles and career aspirations. Next slide, please. But yeah, I think the key thing really is that we just need to sort of keep talking, keep listening, and keep creating workplaces that sort of reflect the diversity of experience across generations, not just in organisational policy, but also in our practice and in the culture of the organisations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebekah. Really interesting set of insights, and interesting to reflect on the nature of particularly your age group, which were suddenly thrust into the world of work or the world of tuition with no possibility for an in-person presence, and how, you know, society may have been drifting towards allowing those possibilities, but it's suddenly being forced upon, you know, one particular age group is quite a dramatic reversal. But as you say, the need to maintain diversity, I think, is absolutely key. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Rebekah. We're going to move on to Tim now.
Great, thank you, and hi again, everybody. So a quick bit about me. I'm kind of on the kind of millennial Gen Z cusp. I'm kind of a really young millennial, and I graduated university in 2017. But during that time, I worked in a design consultancy in central London, which was kind of really powerful tool for learning. It was kind of in the office every day from 9 till 6, with a kind of real mix of the senior directors who are all kind of in their 60s, and a lot of 20-something designers who I worked really closely with, collaborated with. And as Rebekah touched on, that was really powerful from a kind of initial learning point of view, from the perspective of gaining knowledge and developing at such a young age. However, it was kind of a really intense environment. I was living kind of half an hour to an hour away from the office, so my days were kind of 8 till 8 most days, long days, and quite intense. And although I gained a lot of understanding and knowledge from it, I was quite aware that it wasn't necessarily a lifestyle and a work setup that I was comfortable with. So when I left uni a couple of years later, I looked at being self-employed and being a freelancer to enable me to give a life balance that I was more looking for. And I worked mostly independently, mostly with my own clients, but I was very fortunate to have a couple of people who maybe they weren't formally mentors, but I kind of considered them as mentors who I worked with directly for 1 to 2 days a week for a number of years. And I think, as well as obviously the skill benefit that gained, I think when we talk about different traditional, non-traditional work paths, so people that aren't working 9 to 5, what I really gained from working with those two people, those two mentors, was actually understanding of how to run a business, how to set myself up, how to, things I didn't learn in school, things we weren't taught at university, on how to kind of market yourself to people, how to generate invoices, how to submit your tax return, how to set yourself up kind of to ease yourself into something that maybe is slightly more complicated than just having a kind of permanent salary job. And so while I think that kind of I really gained skills and understanding from those people, but I think actually it was the business knowledge, the understanding of the kind of ins and outs of what it took to work for yourself and run your own business that I really gained, and that I think I really would have missed if I was just freelancing for myself. So then that was kind of around the start of the COVID pandemic, and kind of during the first year or two of the pandemic, I started working more and more with one of my clients, and that transitioned into me working for them full time, fully remote, with kind of occasional in-person meetups. And so I think the company that I previously worked for was global, and so the idea of a fully hybrid or fully remote team was the norm, was the default expectation. And I think that's a scenario that everyone we work with thrive with. Obviously, you miss that in-person connection slightly, but there was significant effort put into kind of regular meetups, be that online or for the people in. So we had people stationed in 4 or 5 countries, and so for those national teams, giving them the opportunity to meet in person as much as possible, more socially than for work, was really valued. It was this point that I had the first direct line management experience also. And so understanding the challenges of managing someone that you've never met in person and managing them fully remotely was something that I had to get used to. And again, I was grateful for other people's skills that for people managing me, and what I found useful in being managed fully remotely that I could then apply to manage the person that I was managing fully remotely. So at the start of last year, the team of people that I worked in within our global organization split off and started working fully remotely as Oxygen. And so we're a really young team, and up until a month ago, 4 of the 5 of us were under 30. So we're a really young team, and flexibility was a key consideration when we were setting up our business. I think we all, so there are a couple of people in our team in Oxford, one in Edinburgh, one in Leicester, and I live on the South Coast. So there was this desire of understanding that we all want to work remotely. We all value the flexibility, showing up as our best selves to work. We all felt that having the opportunity to take dogs out for the walk in the morning, go and get a coffee, we all feel our best self when we have that set up. And so having the remote nature of our business was really important for us.
Really interesting, really interesting, Tim. Thank you. The threads of mentoring and learning by osmosis coming through from both yourself and Rebekah, interestingly. And I love the bringing up of the sustainability term, making sure that it's something that's not just a flash in the pan, that it's something that you can live with, and it's not, it's a very core value, I feel. So yeah, very, very interesting. Thank you, Tim. Stuart, on to yourself.
Great, thanks very much. So one of the first things that I've been thinking about is, should you actually say Gen Z or Gen Z? I think I'm going to opt for Gen Z because that's what they say. I guess I'm the oldest person on the panel, and what I wanted to do is just try and take a bit of a step back and frame the way that we actually latterly think about different generations. And it is really easy, as Rebekah said, to fall into the trap of thinking that everyone falls into these really neat boxes, and you see it in clickbait all the time, like only Gen Z will understand these 15 memes, and I can usually get like 3 or 4 of them maybe. But those identity markers don't really take into account all sorts of things like geography, culture, religion, social status. So I guess the first thing to say is that we do have to take them with a bit of a pinch of salt. But the flip side is that being part of a defined generation does give you a voice. When I joined the workplace back in the 90s, like, I don't think I could have reeled off any generational labels except maybe baby boomers. And it's true that all generations have gone through like periods of change and adversity, but it's really difficult to compare what it was like living through the post-war years with growing up as a digital native. But the received wisdom was always that each generation has it a little bit easier than the last. And that's been broadly the case until recently. And there are actually lots of really interesting articles on why people under the age of 45 are 45, 50 are living very different experiences compared to older generations. And the workplace has to take that into account. Obviously, the context for that is economic pressures. There's lots of economic pressures that are framing the workplace, housing, wages, social pressures, having children later impacts women's careers. We've not really seen the impact of AI as well, and how that's going to change the workplace. So there's a whole host of factors about why we now need to look at things differently in the workplace from when I started 20 years ago. And people are coming into the workplace with very different values and expectations and priorities. And you've got workplaces that can't anymore guarantee that nice linear career progression for everyone. When I first started, for a lot of people, the expectation was that you get your head down, you pay your dues, you work really, really hard, you don't necessarily question the authorities, but eventually you would make your way up that career ladder. And the idea of a workplace culture, it was very top down, very one way. And thankfully, most workplaces aren't like that anymore. Most of the people I work with in my company are Gen Z or millennials, and over the years, they and others have reshaped the workplace. But I guess what's important is that it's got to be reshaped for the benefit of individuals, but also the wider organizations. So what I've seen is companies starting with these core values, and I'm sure the companies that you're from today have got their core values. Many companies have things kind of, around working together, covering integrity, respect, customer focus, all those kinds of things. And I think what they are now is establishing a baseline, and they open the door to a really important two-way conversation for all generations, for everyone in the workplace. And those company values are nothing new, but it's different now that it's become truly part of the culture. And another buzzword, in addition to the word culture, is purpose. And that's got lots of different meanings for lots of different people, and is a little bit loaded, but I like to think of purpose or maybe motivation of individuals. Like, what are people's motivations for being here beyond the job description? And when Gen Zs, millennials came into the workplace, they wanted to understand how they fit into the organization. And I think understanding that sense of your purpose and motivation really can, rather than increase the disparity in the generations, like bring people together. Everyone can benefit. Everyone wants to understand their roles. So for me, this is about defining values and breaking them down on a day-to-day level to help people really find their motivation. So just a couple of quick practical examples that we do and that I've seen working really well. So things like creating employee networks, which are ways of feeding back and challenging and probing and asking questions at the center of the company, and that can feed into the board or senior management, and that's a mechanism for really helping to promote constructive two-way feedback. They need really clear guidelines, and their scope needs to be agreed by everyone in order for them to succeed, but they can work really well. And also the idea of progression that I started talking about, it's always a really tricky one. But actually, when you dive a bit deeper with individuals, you can kind of understand what are their motivations. Not everyone wants to be the boss. Not everyone can be the boss. There aren't enough senior leader jobs to go around. So it's about helping people understand their skills and their ambitions. Do they want to be specialists? Do they want to generalize? What type of stakeholders do they want to get close to? So as people enter the workplace, you're having very different conversations to the ones that I had when I started quite a few years ago. So in short, I think the challenges for cross-generational conversations and really getting the best out of everyone is digging down and finding people's motivations, finding ways to unlock the wisdom. Rebekah mentioned curiosity, which is another great word that we use all the time, of different generations, and channel that in a way that works for your company.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Stuart. Very interesting set of call-outs that you bring there with culture and purpose, and diving deeper to understand motivation, skills and ambitions. There's a lot in there to take away. Thank you. All right, we're going to move into a discussion now to pick up on some of these threads. So I wonder if we could come to yourself, Stuart, picking up on the mention of the word osmosis by Rebekah and some of the themes that have come out in Tim's presentation as well. What was your view of managing the ability to pick up on learning through osmosis and shadowing and so on when we're moving to a place of greater flexibility from the workplace?
Yeah, it's really important, isn't it? And it's one of those that after COVID, I think everyone swung into working from home, and there was a real period of transition and resistance once you kind of got used to working from home. So I think it was really important, especially working in a creative environment, to find ways to have that flexibility. So I personally work 3 days in the office and 2 days at home. One of the things we do is have an anchor day. So we do make sure that we have one day where everyone is in together. And those over the desk conversations can be really beneficial. Those ideas bouncing off each other can make a massive difference, and you don't want to lose those. But flexibility is important. So when it comes to having people working from home, like we do set certain rules. So things like if you're having a brainstorm and ideation session, either everyone is hybrid or everyone is in person. It doesn't really work to have a handful of people hybrid and a handful of people in person. So I think there are lots of different things that you can put into play in order to facilitate that learning by osmosis.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Tim, do you have any thoughts?
And I think I've touched on it during my presentation, but obviously there are significant, particularly for kind of people that are just coming into the workforce, there are significant benefits that they can gain from shadowing, from osmosis, from learning from people. And I think it's for us as a kind of fully remote organization, it's one of the key things that we one of the drawbacks of us not meeting up kind of weekly or regularly face to face. And so I think understanding how you can make that work within your systems and within a fully remote team, how regularly you're speaking, whether it's daily, whether it's kind of a couple of meetings a week, putting down sessions, and for certain projects having kind of kickoff meetings where you get everything out in person. I think understanding how you can make that learning and that shadowing work best for you within a remote setup is certainly a challenge, and something that I think we're all trying to understand how best to do.
Yeah, and it's a well-trodden path, isn't it? Some organizations like GitHub have been entirely remote for years now, and have really good practices around how to be an employee and communicate well, and so on and so forth. So there are definitely ways to do so, aren't there? I think it's dependent on the circumstances and the specific situation that you're encountering. Rebekah, how about yourself?
Yeah, I agree. I think we also need to just recognise as well that this is now the era of work that we're sort of living in. We're not going to go back to fully in person. And I think there's sometimes a learning thing there in terms of I might prefer being in the office, but I can't expect the rest of my team to be in the office just because that's what I prefer. And it's about being a bit more deliberate in terms of our learning and, scheduling in-person days, but what's the purpose of that? And actually, is that going to be the most beneficial thing? As an organisation, we're looking at how we can be a bit more digitally efficient. So, thinking about kind of digital tools that can kind of simulate those shadowing experiences or ways of connecting, and just working with the resources that we have and making sure that we're flexible for everybody. It's, you're not going to be able to adhere to everyone's preferences. So being flexible in that and being deliberate in terms of when we choose to work kind of a bit more face-to-face collaboration and when we choose that actually remote might be more efficient, and understanding those differences and working with that to get the best out of the teams.
Yeah, very good. I've started using the word being intentional with what we do and being fully cognizant of what we're trying to get out of a situation, to make sure you've got proper justification behind remote, online, a mix of the two and so on. Yeah, very good. I love the term flexibility for everybody. That's, I think, one of the key takeaways I'm gathering so far from all of your presentations and insights so far. Thank you. And I suppose, thinking about one of the other key threads that was coming out particularly strongly in Stuart's message was this predilection of some of the younger generations to seek a more meaningful work experience. Is this borne out in your experience, Rebekah, would you say?
Yeah, I always think there's a bit of a hard balance to strike in terms of being early in your career and thinking about kind of career progression. Like, you enter the workplace and you think, I just want to do really well and I want to work really hard, but also I want to enjoy the job I'm doing for as long as I'm doing it, and, having that balance there. And I think for me, it's about finding a role that aligns with your own values. What is the impact you're having, your learning opportunities and experiences. That might not be the fastest route to promotion, but actually you're still developing. And I think something that I've learned is that actually progression isn't always vertical, going up through the ranks. It's, you know, it's thinking about what are the influences you're having, what are the contributions you're having elsewhere, you know, your personal growth as well. And sort of, as long as you enjoy what you're doing and you're seeking kind of progression in other areas, if that's what works for you, then I think that's the most valuable thing, really.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, not necessarily the fastest route to promotion. And I think that bears true in all walks of life. You know, there are some areas where you're absolutely keen to move as fast as you can, be it getting onto the housing ladder or getting that promotion, or, you know, whatever it happens to be. But it's not necessarily right, and it can take a little while. In my experience, it can take a little while to understand what I truly need and want, as opposed to you know, necessarily having it laid out on a plate for me. Stuart, how about yourself? Do you have any reflections on this?
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those where it's difficult. I can't remember having an epiphany and going, "Oh, right, I'm really clear on what I want to do and where I'm going to go, and every opportunity that one seeks is not necessarily laid out." But when especially when working with newer staff members, getting people up to speed, I think it is important to highlight that there are different routes, and that idea of individual development, and obviously with housed within CMI here, and that lifelong learning is really important. It's kind of crazy when you think that a lot of people, you do your learning in the first 20 years of your life, and that's it, and then you move on. And personally speaking, I did my degree as an adult whilst I was working along the side, and I got a lot more benefit from it, and it wasn't particularly related to my career in media, but I was really interested. It fueled my passion, and having those two things running in parallel really worked for me. So yeah, as Rebekah says, that linear idea of progression isn't the only way.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. Thank you. I think you're absolutely right. The potential for lifelong learning, it's not something that is necessarily linear. It's not necessarily building on top of one another. It's about layering foundations and understanding in which direction is right for you at the time. And from your points earlier about perhaps having different priorities as you move through life, and, you know, different challenges around having families and so on and so forth, it could be that what's right for you 5 years ago isn't right now, and might not be right again in 5 years to come. Tim, how about yourself in terms of the whole value piece and so on?
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo Rebekah and Stuart's point around kind of non-linear, the idea of a kind of a non-linear career progression being kind of really important in when we talk about this. And I think it might be something that's more prevalent in the creative industries, but there's definitely a number of people that, for example, I went to university with, or that are kind of a similar kind of generation to me, whose kind of idea of what they want from work doesn't necessarily been a kind of a 9 to 5. It's been actually understanding where they get value, where they can add value to businesses, and building a career and a journey that benefits their self and their lifestyle. And so the idea necessarily of kind of getting onto the career ladder and moving up isn't necessarily something that that for myself that I wanted to do, or for kind of a number of people that I've encountered on my work journey.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, quite right. Okay, staying with yourself, can we talk about the balance that you've struck within your organization around working from home? How would you go about diversifying the employee base? Were you to grow and take on perhaps an older colleague who was very keen on being in person rather than remote? And have you encountered that sort of challenge in the past? And if so, how have you gone about addressing it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I've definitely, as I mentioned earlier, I've worked in workplaces that there was an emphasis on being in person every day. And I know from my experiences of work that lifestyle doesn't necessarily bring out the best in what I can bring to the table at work. And I think that's that's one of the kind of salient points really for me, is around actually understanding how, not necessarily just across generations, because there'll be people within, as Stuart mentioned, trying not to lump kind of people into generational brackets. But there will be people that the best out of them, they thrive on being in a working environment where there are a load of people around them, where they can connect, where they can bounce ideas off each other. And there'll be people who kind of tend to lean more on myself, that they know kind of coming to work feeling, not having to commute, maybe feeling a bit more rested, and being kind of being independent and being able to kind of shut out the noise and really focus, that's how they bring the best value. And so I think understanding that maybe not just across generations, but different people have different preferences for how they can be most productive and bring their best selves to work.
Yeah, absolutely. Stuart, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think getting back to those couple of words that we used earlier around that wisdom and curiosity, and how you kind of can get share the wisdom and foster a kind of a curious approach. And ways to do that are to pair up people, potentially of different generations, or just kind of cross departmental teams to work on a particular project. And that's really interesting and useful for things like innovation sessions, trying to come up with new ideas or think of something different, because actually one can fall into the trap of kind of looking at what you've done before and trying to better it. But actually, can you take a step back and learn from someone of a really different experience, of a different background, of a different perspective, different education, different training? So actually showing that idea of diversity as a real superpower of how that will join people together and hopefully prompt new ideas and different ways of working.
Yeah, really interesting. And in fact, an old organisation of mine used to put on what we called randomised coffee trials, on a play on their sort of clinical trial approach, where we used to pair two people together completely randomly from a list of people who stuck themselves forward for this, and it was then up to you to arrange a 30-minute coffee, on a once a month type basis, and your rotation would change. It was absolutely brilliant. Different conversations with people you wouldn't necessarily talk to surfaced all sorts of different possibilities and understandings and learnings. So it was absolutely fantastic. Rebekah, last word from you on this. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I completely agree with Stuart there in terms of it being a sort of a superpower. It's definitely not a hurdle, generational diversity, and I think it's what's needed for a workplace to sort of thrive. You're going to get people with different perspectives coming in from different walks of life, and they're going to offer different perspectives on things and new ways of thinking. But I think at the same time we need to be careful that doesn't, undermine or diminish what has been done previously. And I think sometimes there's that difficult balance to strike, that the younger generation are going to come in with fresh thinking and change everything, but actually sometimes things are working, and people have experience, and I learn just as much as I'm sure my colleagues learn from me in terms of my experiences from what they've done for years before. So I think it's a learning experience for both sides, and we need to mix it together and not look at it as one or the other.
Yeah, interesting. Very good. And then staying with yourself, Rebekah, there was mentioned earlier, I think from yourself, Stuart, around career pathways. What's your experience of the way that Bracknell Forest Council and your other organisations have facilitated different career pathways rather than the conventional?
Yeah, I mean, I've gone down quite a per se traditional route. You know, I graduated, I went straight onto a graduate program, and then I got a permanent job off the back of that, and I think that worked for me. But actually, there are obviously, like you say, loads of different career pathways now, and I think it comes back to that thing about it's not linear. It's no longer linear. My organisation, we have just recently launched an academy model as part of our workforce programme, and it's looking at the ways in which you can develop your career through different pathways. So for example, social care, you step up to social work, you can join that at any stage. Apprenticeships, you know, it's not just entry-level apprenticeships, you can join that at any stage, and it kind of comes back to that whole progression thing as well. It's not always, you know, vertical straight up. Sometimes it's a side to side to up kind of move, and actually even if it's not going up, and you're going side to side, you're still progressing, you're still learning a different area of work. And I think that's the important thing. It's about empowering kind of employees and staff to really kind of find what's right for them, find the values that they back and they believe in, and what are the right opportunities for them, and supporting that. And I think we do it quite well. But yeah, I think it's just that acknowledgement that actually career pathways don't just start off the back of a university degree. You know, it can be from anything now. So yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And I suppose, Tim, you have quite a bit more flexibility than a large organisation, I suppose, in offering up different pathways and different opportunities for your team. How's that manifested so far?
So far, really well. I think there are obviously, as kind of we learned from the conversation so far, the fully remote setup is not going to be for everybody. It's very much a kind of a there are 5 of us in our team, and it's something that we all value kind of quite highly in what we get out of work. But that's not to say at some point we might not employ somebody that has a different view, and maybe we need to kind of at that point kind of reconsider how we can get the best out of them. But I think it's definitely a kind of a discussion to have on a kind of person by person basis for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And Stuart, any final thoughts on this from the global organisation?
Yeah, I think it's really useful just to start with skills, and like the skills you've got, and the skills that you want to develop. And I often say to my team, like, be selfish about it. Like, actually, what do you want to do? Think about areas that you're interested in, and how can we get you to that point? How can we help load you up and give you experience and exposure in areas that you're interested in? And I started myself, and I've done quite a few, I guess you could call, sideways moves. I was executive producer at a Classic FM radio station, and then moved across to the commercial team, still in a creative role. And then latterly moved to the charity team, all at a roughly similar level, all using each one of them, building on the skills that I gained before from an editorial point of view, from a commercial brand point of view. How can I use that in the charity sector? So actually, collecting all these different skills and having opportunities to work with people and learn from people and have formal training like CMI along the way massively helps.
And I imagine and hope that it helped the teams that you were moving into as well, bringing that different perspective and that different experience. Brilliant. Thank you all very much. Really, really interesting conversation. So let's turn our eyes to our audience and dive into some of the questions that have been raised. So Mary, I believe we've had a question from Tim. Here we go. So what would the speakers want out of any baby boomers in their organizations? What does collaboration look like? Tim, can we come to yourself first?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple of things. I think one of them is I think the understanding that if you're trying to hire somebody, they might have that flexibility might be a requirement for them. And I think obviously that works both ways, in that if you've got a job that is kind of fixed 5 days in the office, but you might be losing kind of great candidates, great people for that job who simply can't do that. They might have young families. And so kind of being flexible and understanding that people have different attitudes and different requirements from work, but that doesn't make them any less valuable. It doesn't mean that they're going to be a less powerful employer. I think that's one of the things. And I think the second is trust, and trusting the people that you're working with. I know that that's not kind of the sole issue around why we're talking here about flexible work, but I know that a number of people that I've collaborated before worked for kind of a major consumer product organization where during the COVID pandemic they were required to come in every day because their employer didn't trust them, and I know that put a lot of people off, and everybody that I know that did work for that organization has now left. And so understanding that actually, trust the people that you're working for, understand that they do have personal commitments, sometimes family commitments, and being flexible for them as your employer, I think is important.
Yeah, trust and flexibility works both ways, doesn't it? Very good. Thank you, Tim. Stuart, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that those are really important points. And I was just thinking as a manager, and we've also, like, you can't kind of make these sweeping claims about one particular generation. So as a manager, for me, what would a baby boomer want out of the organization would be the question that I would be asking. And like we were saying earlier, actually listening to individuals, tapping into their motivations and their passions can be like hugely beneficial for the organization. So I think that there's probably not one single thing you'd necessarily want that was particularly different from someone doing the same role of a different generation, but actually understanding on a real personal level what can they offer, what are they interested in, and how can that help connect and motivate and inspire the wider team.
Thank you very much. So bring it back to the individual and understanding what it is that they need as much as what it is you want and need as an organisation too. Rebekah, any final thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I think there's something around succession planning and workforce planning and capturing learning as we go. I mean, quite a sweeping statement, but the sector that I work in, you tend to find there's quite a lot of, it's an aging workforce, and we need to make sure we're capturing the learning that has come from people that have been in the organisation for a long time, potentially before they go on to retirement, and actually making sure we're doing that in advance and making sure that collaboration is happening from the get-go, and it's continually happening. I think, I mean, my organisation, obviously we work sort of in the political environment and space, so there are always a lot of changes over time and over people's careers. So just learning from that, and I think it goes back to that point in terms of we're not coming in to change everything. Sometimes things do work, and actually we really do value the learning that's come before us in terms of kind of the younger generation coming in. So I think it's just having those open conversations and learning about people's careers and experiences from as soon as you start.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. Interesting sets of responses. Mary, let's move on to the question from Jezbir. Here we go. So how can we help young staff working with peers close to their age set healthy boundaries, especially on social media, while still supporting their growth and respecting their views? Rebekah, can we come to you first?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question. I mean, young professionals, I would say, do kind of need clear guidance on boundaries, especially if it is, they are starting in the workplace in a new organisation. But at the same time, it's that thing about trust and respect, and not being felt that you don't feel like you're being kind of handheld because you're younger and you've got no experience. I think it's striking that balance. I think we need to not assume that they sort of lack understanding on that, and therefore sort of the idea of co-production and co-creating, policies with them, and offering sort of reflective supervision, and acknowledging as well just the sort of emotions that might be involved with that. It is very new. So I think really it's down to empowering the individual, not sort of policing them in terms of this is how you do it, and bringing them on that journey with them. That co-production element I think is really important, and when people then feel heard, they're more likely to share more and kind of be a bit more embedded. So yeah, that would be my reflections on that.
Yeah, it's a fantastic talk. Good thought. Tim, can we come to yourself?
Yeah, and I think we've talked quite a lot about learning by osmosis, and obviously that applies to soft skills as well as hard skills. And so understanding, particularly for people that are maybe coming straight out of school and straight into the workforce, or people coming straight out of university and straight into workforce, understanding the kind of requirements of working in a professional environment, understanding in this case that you are, even if you're working with peers close to your age, or understanding the difference between the personal and professional and setting those boundaries. I think understanding that learning for new people coming into the workforce is really important. And so
Yeah, absolutely. Mixture of giving them the opportunities to learn for themselves, while also giving them guardrails and boundaries and support alongside. Any final thoughts, Stuart?
Yeah, I guess it's boundaries have massively changed in the last couple of years, let alone the last decade, and what social media started out as is very different. It's not social media anymore. It is more of an entertainment platform, a time filling platform. So are those boundaries fit for purpose in today's age? So I think there is a bit of a step back and a check there, and actually harnessing the power of individuals who have got a social media presence is something that almost every company wants to do, like really wants to lean into. And you see big businesses like Tesco and Argos and Currys actually encourage employees to go out there and create content and actually develop a really significant footprint themselves. So yes, you need policies and guidelines and boundaries, but actually is there a flip side where you can lean into that and it actually works for your business too?
Yeah, it's that risk reward discussion, isn't it? Good. Thank you very much, Stuart. Shall we move on to Sanjay's question? Here we go. So as a senior doctor, it frustrates me when junior doctors talk about being tired or overworked. I did far longer hours at their stage. How can I shift my mindset and better understand? I think that's meant to be. Stuart, can we come to yourself first on this?
Yes, yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? When you're kind of comparing your experience with people coming into workplace, and I guess you're never going to win if you're kind of comparing what it might have been like 20, 30 years ago with now. Like I think one of the things maybe behind this question is it's difficult to tell where it's coming from. It is that kind of the thing that jumps out to me is junior doctors talking about it and kind of sharing that and almost wanting to be heard, to be recognised that this is that they are living with this. It feels like a problem for them, which I guess you've kind of got to acknowledge. So I was just wondering, is it around kind of recognizing people's efforts, kind of somehow rewarding in other ways, like people going that extra mile and kind of acknowledging, it is a significant workload, but one of those ideas of like being busy, it's kind of strange because everyone feels like they're massively busy, and I'm sure junior doctors are significantly busier than I am. But there is a bit of a case of putting it into context and prioritizing. So maybe there's something around that kind of actually recognizing as a group what individuals are doing, and maybe that will somehow address the issue.
Yeah, very good. Rebekah, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to empathy, doesn't it? It comes down to empathy on both sides. I wouldn't say, Gen Z have had it worse, because I don't think, every kind of generation has had its challenges. I think, just speaking from personal experience, my learning experience was very different. I didn't do my A levels. I left school, months before my A level exams, and actually didn't then study properly until I started my degree in the October of that year. So, and then obviously that looked different. So I think then going into the workplace, where things can be so fast moving, you've kind of moved from a completely different way of working as such, and being moved into a different culture and having to adapt to that. So I think there's potentially that context there to consider in terms of the difference in lead up, but at the same time that doesn't diminish what anyone in any other generation has gone through, and the challenges that they faced or continue to face now. So I think it's about kind of having empathy for the younger generation, but also vice versa. We need to consider the fact that we're not a unique experience. It's just we might have had things slightly differently, and challenges faced slightly differently.
Yeah, and those differences are not necessarily a bad thing if it brings a different perspective to the conversation. All right, Tom, final word on this from yourself, Tim?
Yeah, I think the word that Rebekah used, empathy, I think is really key here. I think it's kind of taking those comments at face value, and that the kind of junior doctors not trying to say that they worked harder than any previous generations, but understanding that it's genuinely kind of almost a kind of a cry for help, saying, okay, this is what we're feeling. How can we work together to improve things, rather than kind of feeling like it's a reflection on that they had it harder than any other generation.
Yeah, fantastic. Lots of very poignant thoughts. I'm afraid we're rapidly approaching time, so I'm going to ask you all for your key takeaways, if I may, please. Stuart, can we come to yourself first, please?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's for me, it's been really interesting hearing what everyone's said, and it's that difference between acknowledging that the workplace is different, but is constantly evolving, constantly changing. And really what we're hopefully getting better at is understanding people on an individual level, and understanding those individual needs. So whereas we might say it's different generations are helping to be a bit of a catalyst for change, really the way of addressing that change is on an individual basis.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, Stuart. Tim, yourself?
Yeah, I'd second that, really. I think the fact that the fact that we don't want to kind of pigeonhole different generations into distinct categories, and I think obviously there are potential trends kind of from generation to generation, but kind of treating people as individuals and saying each individual has their own needs, wants from their coming to work and their day-to-day lives. So understanding those requirements on a kind of more granular level than kind of across generations, I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Rebekah, final word.
Yeah, I think individuality is just so important and so valuable. And I'd just say that really, especially sort of to sort of my generation, but don't be afraid to make your mark, because actually it's such a strength having generational differences in the workplace. the title of this event, we have shared values. We're all in the workplace together. We're there for the same journey. So let's utilise maybe different perspectives and use it as a strength and not a hurdle.
I think that is an excellent point on which to stop. Thank you all very much indeed. That's been an absolutely fascinating conversation. Mary, over to yourself.
Yes, so that's it for today's session. Thank you to our hosts, Matt, and to our speakers, Rebekah, Tim and Stuart, for your insight and expertise. Please stay tuned to hear more about CMI membership, and thank you for joining us.
Don't forget, as a CMI member, you can find the latest management and leadership insights at managers.org.uk. If you're not yet a member, join our community to discover CMI Confidence with on-demand resources, our network of mentors, and industry-leading accreditations.